My wife cheated with my brother and lied about our son's paternity. So I divorced her, took the will, and left them to destroy each other. I have a younger brother, Caleb, who has despised me for as long as I can remember. If you're thinking it might have been out of jealousy, you're wrong. I wasn't the favorite. He was. So he had no reason to envy me. Let me explain. My mom always spoiled Caleb. He was the golden child in our household. She cooked his meals, washed his clothes, and even made me help him with homework. I was expected to assist because he's your brother, but that favor was never returned. I grew to accept it since I was naturally independent. Maybe I enabled it by always giving in to his needs without expecting anything in return. He never helped when I needed it and only reached out if he wanted something. I was a quiet, introverted kid who liked to study and stay in my own world. Caleb, on the other hand, was just like our dad, loud, rough, and always seeking attention. I was also blunt, the type to speak my mind without sugarcoating. I think my mother developed a negative image of me because of that. Caleb ended up being the family's favorite. I didn't care much when we were younger, but the real problem started when he began mocking me just for being different. He'd make fun of my height or the fact that I wore glasses. He'd sneak into my room to read my diary, just so he could run to Mom and report anything personal I had written. I'd yell at him and complain, but my parents would just laugh and tell me it wasn't a big deal. He did worse things too. He once almost broke my glasses and put disgusting stuff in my food. One time, he dropped little stones into my cereal. Thankfully, I spotted them before they damaged my teeth. When I told Mom, she just shrugged it off, saying, "That's how brothers bond." Every time we argued, Caleb would hit me right where it hurt, targeting my deepest insecurities. We went to the same school, and he knew I was being bullied by some kids. Instead of standing by me, he sided with them. He'd join in, calling me names like ugly loser or hairy monkey, even egging the bullies on to get physical with me because to him, I was just a big failure. Another time, after a silly fight, I don't even remember what it was about, he told me to kill myself. Most of his insults I could handle, but that one hit deep. I was battling mental health issues back then, and hearing that from my own brother was crushing. With Dad always at work and Mom brushing things off, or even blaming me, I often felt completely alone. She once scolded me, claiming I brought it on myself by playing too much and annoying him. Things kept getting worse. In high school, he even tried to burn my hair. And shockingly, Mom defended him again, saying he was just playing. Who even plays like that? Thankfully, that was the breaking point for my dad. He finally took my side and called out the toxic dynamic. He threatened to call the police on Caleb. That was a wake-up call for my brother. He had never faced real consequences before. He looked stunned as Dad told him that enough was enough, and that it was time he started respecting his older brother. Later, Dad came to my room to talk. I was shocked. He had always told Caleb how alike they were, and I never thought he'd stand up for me. But he said he had been waiting for years, thinking Caleb would outgrow his behavior, only to realize that he was turning into a full-blown bully. Hearing that made me feel seen for the first time in years. I nearly cried. I opened up to Dad about everything, what Caleb had done, the bullying at school, the emotional toll it all took on me. He was stunned. The very next day, he visited the school and spoke to the principal, making sure the kids harassing me knew there would be serious consequences if it continued. That evening, Dad signed me up for MMA classes at a local gym. He looked at me and said, "You need to man up and stand up to the bullies in my life." I'll admit, watching a nerdy kid like me try to fight must have looked hilarious at first, but like everything else I commit to, I gave it my full focus. I carved out time from my study schedule to train daily and attend MMA classes. Not to brag, but it changed my life, my confidence, my strength, and even my body. Then one day, Caleb struck again. He had stolen my pocket money, the money we earned for helping with chores. I had been saving that for weeks. He snuck into my room and took it without a second thought. I caught him just as he was about to ride off with his friends. I stood in front of him and demanded he return it, reminding him that stealing was wrong. Caleb just smirked and mocked me, saying all I ever did was run to Daddy for help. I don't know what came over me, but I punched him, square in the face. The shock on his face was priceless as he fell to the ground. I walked up, pulled my money out of his pocket, and shoved him back down. He started wailing like a toddler, which honestly was hilarious coming from a teenage boy. Of course, my mom came running outside the moment she heard her baby crying. When she found out I had hit him, she looked stunned, then furious. She scolded me for being a bad example, insisting that, as the older brother, I should be teaching him better behavior. Caleb, of course, looked smug, enjoying every second of me getting scolded. Later that evening, my mom complained to Dad about how I had attacked Caleb and needed to be reined in. Dad, clearly not amused, asked us both to explain. I told him the truth, how Caleb had stolen the money I worked hard to save. Caleb tried to justify it by saying he needed it for a date and, as his brother, I should have just helped him. But Dad wasn't having it. He told Caleb he was lucky I only punched him, because anyone else would have called the cops. He went on to tell him stealing was never okay, no matter the reason. Caleb didn't like that and threw a fit, clearly expecting Mom to back him up. But Dad stood his ground. When Caleb realized I wasn't going to be punished, he screamed that he hated me and stormed off, locking himself in his room. Since that day, Caleb kept his distance. He had finally realized he couldn't bully me anymore, and even Dad wasn't going to indulge his behavior. For once, I felt like we were on equal footing. Sure, he couldn't physically mess with me anymore, but that didn't stop the nasty comments. He'd mutter insults under his breath when no one was around. Things like nerd or loser. If I asked him something, he'd act like I didn't exist. If he wanted to say something to me, he'd use Mom as a middleman. I'd ask her why he couldn't just talk to me directly, and she'd just tell me to be more patient and understanding. I didn't know if it was just puberty or if he really despised me, but it wore me down. Over the years, I tolerated his behavior, but eventually, I just wanted out. I begged my mom several times to sit us both down and help mediate a conversation, but she always refused. She said she didn't want to get involved. I even asked her why she thought he treated me like this, but she never gave me an answer, just brushed the question aside like it didn't matter. Eventually, I got into my dream university. I was a straight-A student and earned a scholarship. My dad threw a party in my honor, and even my mom seemed proud for once. Caleb, however, stayed cold and distant, barely acknowledging anything. The day I left for college was a mix of excitement and relief. I was finally escaping that toxic house. The first few months at university were freeing. I made new friends, loved my classes, and started building a life separate from the toxic atmosphere I had grown up in. The constant fear of Caleb's verbal jabs disappeared, and I felt peace for the first time. During my second year at university, I met Karen, my future wife. A friend introduced us at a frat party, and we hit it off immediately. Coming from a conservative, religious family, having children outside of marriage was a huge taboo. But in our final year, we found out Karen was pregnant. So, right after graduation, we got married. It was a small, simple ceremony, but it was filled with joy. Our families were supportive and everything felt right. At that time, I believed she was my soulmate. I've always valued loyalty and monogamy. I wanted to love one woman for the rest of my life, to come home to her and build a future. Even when other women showed interest in me over the years, I never acted on it. I was happy in my marriage. Karen was everything I dreamed of, and I never wanted to hurt her. But the truth is, she didn't feel the same. There were 2 separate occasions when I found out she had cheated on me. The first was a long, drawn-out affair with her married co-worker. The second was a fling with her high school ex while she visited family out of state. Looking back now, I know some people might think I was naive, or even pathetic, for staying. And honestly, I don't blame them. In both situations, we separated for a time, but I ultimately chose to forgive her. I didn't want our child growing up in a broken home, and deep down, I hoped we could move past it. We were young then, so I told myself the affair with her co-worker was just immaturity and poor judgment. For a while, things seemed stable. I never fully regained my trust in her, but I did everything I could to push the doubts aside. I figured that if I was going to forgive, I had to mean it. I had to start fresh. It's now been 4 years since her second betrayal, and for a time, I genuinely believed I made the right choice. Karen appeared to have changed. We were building a life together, planning for our future. I truly thought we were happy, but 3 months ago, that illusion was shattered. Karen sat me down and calmly confessed that she had been sleeping with someone for a while, and that our son might not even be mine. The moment she said it, I felt like the ground disappeared from beneath me. I was flooded with shock, betrayal, disbelief. My entire world spun. I couldn't even process what I was hearing. Somehow, I managed to ask why she'd kept this from me, how she could do something so cruel, but her reaction, cold, detached. She didn't seem moved at all by the pain she'd caused. Her answers were vague, and honestly, they only left me more confused. It was like something out of a nightmare. Standing face to face with the woman I loved, realizing I had no idea who she really was. I kept begging her for the truth. I had a right to know who fathered the child I'd been raising since birth. Eventually, she told me, it was Caleb. My stomach dropped. My eyes went wide, and I asked her what she meant. That's when Karen explained how it all started. She said they first grew close during the Thanksgiving break when I introduced her to my family, and she stayed with us until New Year's. I remembered that time. Caleb, who was normally cold and dismissive, had actually been friendly and respectful to Karen. I was relieved back then. I didn't want her to feel unwelcome. Karen had always wanted to be embraced by my family, and she started spending more time with my mom. She noticed that Caleb and I weren't close and asked me about it. I opened up to her, told her everything about our strained childhood, and admitted that I didn't think we'd ever have a real relationship. She listened and seemed to understand, but instead of respecting that boundary, she made it her mission to bridge the gap between us. She started including Caleb in our plans. If we were going to watch a movie, she'd invite him along, and we'd end up watching whatever he wanted. Looking back, I guess we did talk a little during that time. A few awkward words, here and there, like a significant improvement compared to the years of complete silence between us. I do recall Karen and Caleb spending time together, playing video games and hanging out, but I never thought much of it. Karen told me that one day, Caleb had opened up to her about his emotional struggles and a recent breakup with his girlfriend. She said he was vulnerable and broken, and that they ended up forming a friendship. According to her, he would sometimes flirt with her when I wasn't around, and what started off as harmless eventually spiraled into something physical. She claimed she couldn't control herself anymore. I shut my eyes, sick to my stomach at the thought of my wife and brother sleeping together. Karen said she felt ashamed after it happened and immediately left our house. That part made sense. I remembered how she suddenly insisted on returning home when I thought she'd stay through New Year's. I tried to convince her to stay, but she was adamant about leaving. When we returned to college after the holidays, she acted completely normal, her cheerful self, so I never questioned it. 2 weeks later, she found out she was pregnant. Now she was telling me she had no idea whether the child was mine or Caleb's. She never sought proof because I had already stepped up, and in her words, I was the more dependable brother. So she chose to stay with me, and that's why she agreed to marry me. I felt like my world was collapsing. The son I had adored and raised from the beginning might not even be mine. I asked Karen if she had been sleeping with Caleb even recently, and she nodded. She admitted that their chemistry had always been strong and never really went away. They would meet secretly at hotels while she lied to me about working late. Half of her so-called business trips, she said, were actually romantic getaways with Caleb. I asked her why she even bothered staying married to me if she wanted to be with my brother. Karen said she didn't want to be the one to end the marriage. Seeing me be a great father made her stay, even if her heart wasn't fully in it. She admitted it started as a mistake and spiraled out of control, and she simply didn't know how to stop. I told her I was glad she told me the truth. Then I calmly said I was packing up and leaving. Karen broke down in tears and begged for my forgiveness. She said she expected me to scream, yell, do something. But there I was, silently packing my clothes into a suitcase. She kept saying that if I really loved her, I would fight for her, that every marriage has mistakes. When she realized I wasn't reacting, she changed her approach. She brought up our son, saying that a divorce would ruin him, and children shouldn't grow up in broken homes. I reminded her that I might not even be his father. That shut her down instantly. She started yelling that I was being cruel, questioning how I could just walk away after being there since day one. It was clear she had convinced herself that nothing could ever make me leave. And maybe that was my fault. Maybe I let too many things slide in the past. I did love her, but I think it was more because we had built a life together, because I believed we shared a child, and because we had been together since college. Karen insisted it wasn't too late, that we could fix it, but I didn't believe her anymore. I had no patience left, and trust had always been the foundation for me. Her words felt hollow. Even if I could forgive her, I would never be able to forget that she slept with my brother. I've always believed in second chances, that people are flawed and mistakes happen. But this wasn't a mistake. This crossed a boundary I could never return from. I left her crying on the doorstep and checked into a hotel that night. The next morning, I went straight to my parents' house and told them everything. Karen's affair with Caleb, and how it had been going on behind my back for years. The shock on their faces said it all. My mother, true to form, immediately tried to defend Caleb. She refused to believe it at first, saying her sweet boy could never do something like that to his own brother. Determined to get to the bottom of it, I asked my parents to stay silent and let me call Caleb right then and there, in front of them. I explained that if he thought it was just the two of us on the line, he might lower his guard and reveal the truth. They agreed and remained quiet. When Caleb answered, I wasted no time. I confronted him about the affair with my wife. At first, he denied it outright, acted like I was insane, but when I told him Karen had confessed everything, he shifted instantly, calling her names and accusing her of being loose. He had the audacity to say it wasn't his fault that women were attracted to him, claiming he was the better-looking brother. I told him clearly that I would be exposing him, that everyone would know. Caleb just laughed, saying no one would believe me anyway because he was still the golden child. I scoffed at his arrogance and thanked him for confirming the truth, because our parents had been listening the entire time. Caleb went quiet. Then he began to stutter, trying to walk back his words and explain himself. He fumbled miserably. My mother, still in shock, asked him directly if it was true. He stammered through a weak excuse, blaming everyone but himself, desperately trying to pin it all on Karen. I saw it then. My mother's expression changed. The same woman who always protected Caleb now looked at him with disappointment and disbelief. In that moment, I felt something deep shift. For years, I had suffered through Caleb's cruelty while everyone dismissed my pain. But now, he stood exposed, stripped of all the favoritism and lies. Even my father, normally stoic and composed, couldn't hold back. He asked me for the phone and let Caleb have it. "Caleb," he began, his voice heavy with disappointment. "What you've done isn't just a betrayal of your brother. It's a betrayal of this entire family. You slept with your brother's wife, and you kept doing it even after they got married. There are consequences for actions like that, and today you've destroyed the trust we had in you." He continued, "I raised both of you to value family, to be loyal and decent. What you've done goes against everything I've ever tried to teach you. You showed no regard for your brother's pain, no respect for his marriage. You've not only hurt him, you've broken the very foundation of our family." There was a pause, a silence that hung in the air like judgment. "I blame myself and your mother for enabling you, but that ends now. I'm cutting you off from the college fund I set aside for you. You'll have to figure out how to pay your tuition. And I'm not paying for your lifestyle anymore either. You think sleeping with married women makes you a man? Let's see what happens when you have no money to back you up." I stayed quiet throughout. Even though I had dreamed of yelling at Caleb for years, watching my father finally stand up for me felt like more than enough. Caleb kept trying to justify himself, but my dad ended the call, shutting him down. My mom came over and hugged me. It had been so long since we had shared anything close to affection. In that hug, I felt the kind of silent understanding I'd always longed for. She whispered that she was sorry for never believing me. I thought of my teenage self, how he would never have imagined being vindicated like this, let alone embraced by the very person who once ignored his pain. After that, my dad helped me find a good divorce lawyer. Karen and her attorney tried to fight dirty, demanding alimony since I made more than her. But her affair gave me the upper hand in court. We also took a paternity test. The results confirmed what I had feared most. Caleb was the biological father of the child I had raised as my own. I can't even begin to describe the pain that hit me. It hurt worse than hearing about the affair. I felt sick. Everything I had poured into fatherhood suddenly felt like it didn't belong to me. But I stayed strong. Karen begged me to remain in our son's life. She said he didn't deserve to be punished for what we had done. But I couldn't bring myself to see him again. I just couldn't. I reminded me too much of Caleb, and I hated that. After the divorce was finalized, I finally felt free. I moved into my own bachelor pad. It felt surreal at first. Having gotten married so young, I'd never really lived alone. But since I was always independent by nature, I adjusted quickly to the solo lifestyle. And honestly, I loved it. 2 weeks ago, my dad gave me a call. He said he was planning to change his will because he didn't want Caleb to receive a single cent. If there's one thing about my dad, it's that he's stubborn as hell. Once he made up his mind to cut Caleb off, he meant it. Caleb tried reaching out. He even showed up at my parents' house, begging for forgiveness, but they didn't even let him in. Even my mother, who had always given in to his tantrums, seemed completely done with him. I know this situation must be tearing her up inside, but for once she held the line. And through all of it, Caleb never once reached out to me. Not even a text to apologize. It was obvious he didn't regret what he did, he just hated being cut off. My dad told me he was leaving everything to me, all of it, his house, his investments, his retirement funds, his life insurance, roughly $2 million in total. The only thing he planned to leave Caleb was a symbolic $1 to prevent any legal contest. The only clause in the will was that if Dad passed before Mom, she'd still be allowed to live in the house, even though ownership would transfer to me. And of course I agreed. I'd never throw my mother out, no matter what happened. Somehow, Caleb found out about the will. Since our parents were ignoring him, he called me yesterday. He tried to sound sincere, told me he was struggling to keep up with college, that Karen had been pestering him for child support since learning the truth about the baby. Said he had no money, was looking for jobs but couldn't find any. Then he begged me to help him. Said he wanted to talk to the family and start fresh. I laughed in his face. I told him I was done with him, that he should have thought about all this before sleeping with my wife and getting her pregnant. He snapped, calling me unfair and saying Karen was equally to blame. I agreed. I reminded him that I had divorced her, and now she was his problem, not mine. So he better stop complaining to me about her or their kid. When he started to raise his voice, I cut him off. Told him the golden child era was over, that he was now the black sheep of the family, the brother who slept with his own brother's wife. That's when he broke. He started crying, told me everyone had turned against him, our grandparents, our extended relatives, which, to be fair, was true, but I didn't care anymore. I told him we were done, that I wasn't his brother anymore, and to never contact me again. Since then, I've been replaying that conversation in my head. I won't lie, it hurt hearing him cry like that. He hasn't cried like that since we were kids, and I guess that's why I'm here. Should I talk to my parents about him? Would I be an a-hole if I didn't? Hi, everyone. Many of you have asked why I'm no longer in contact with my son Henry. Some even called me cruel. I'm sorry, but I'm just not comfortable raising another man's child. This isn't some stepdad situation. I was lied to, led to believe he was my son, only to discover he was actually my brother's. Of course, I'm heartbroken. I've cried over it for days. But the real reason I don't want to maintain contact is because I can't have Karen in my life. If I stay in touch with her child, she'll find a way to worm her way back in, and I need my peace. Call me cruel, call me selfish. But I just can't see him again, or at least not for a very long time. Most of you have correctly guessed that it was, in fact, my mother who had told Caleb about Dad changing his will. Caleb had called me only as a last resort. When I confronted her in front of my father, she broke down in tears. She told me that I had punished Caleb enough and that he had learned his lesson. But my dad wasn't having it. He looked her dead in the eye and said that if she truly believed Caleb's actions were forgivable, then he didn't see how they could stay married. He told her point blank that he could never forgive Caleb for what he had done. His words silenced her immediately. He made it crystal clear. If she ever spoke to Caleb again and we found out, she could pack her bags and leave. Like I said, my dad is an incredibly stubborn man. Hopefully, my mother has finally learned from this. I re-added this post to say, it's been 5 months since my last update. My relationship with my parents has improved a lot over the past few months. My dad and I now go golfing together every weekend. He treats me more like a friend than a son these days, and it's honestly a great feeling. My mom, although I know she misses Caleb deeply, has kept her distance. She hasn't spoken to him, not that I know of, anyway. The last update I heard about Caleb came from my cousin. Apparently, Caleb had been asking everyone in the family for money and eventually had to drop out of college because he couldn't afford the fees. He's now living with Karen, and from what I've heard, they're raising Henry together. Caleb works part-time as a mechanic. I guess it's a good thing that he's finally taking responsibility. I never talk about Caleb with my parents, and they never bring him up either. It's like we all silently agreed to cut that chapter out of our lives. For those of you asking how I'm doing, honestly, I'm in a much better place now. I was promoted at work 2 months ago, and my salary has gone up significantly. I haven't been dating anyone yet. I think I still need more time and space to fully heal from everything. I've started going to therapy sessions, so we'll see how that goes, thanks to everyone who supported me throughout all of this.